Hi everyone, welcome back to Eve Math Tutoring. Today's lesson is going to be on standard deviation. Okay, so now standard deviation is usually calculated a lot in statistics, and what it is a measure of variation of values about the mean. So it measures how far values are from the mean of your data, which is the average of your data. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually give you two different formulas that we can use, and we're going to try using both. You can use whichever formula you find easier. So it's going to be the root of the sum of each value x minus the average values squared all over the total number of values minus 1. And this is called the sample standard deviation. Okay, that's formula 1. Formula 2 is going to be s n times the sum of x squared minus the sum of x all squared all over n times n minus 1. Okay, now in this formula, n is the number of values in the data set that you're looking at, and x represents each individual value in the data set, and x bar is your average or mean of your data set. Okay, and as you remember, this symbol represents the sum of, so that just means you have to add up all those values in front of whatever is in front of the sum of symbol. Okay, so that's standard deviation. So those are the formulas that we're going to use. So I'm going to try a few examples here. Okay, now, so let's start off with the following example. So the question is, find the standard deviation of the following values: 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So let's start with formula 1 first. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually find, now let's write down the formula first. So the formula was sum of x minus x bar all squared all over n minus 1. Okay, so you write down the formula first, and then at that point what you're going to do is you're going to find your x bar value. And now this is assuming you don't have a calculator which does standard deviation. Now there are calculators, scientific calculators, that you just plug in the values and it would give you the answer right away without using a formula. So this is just showing you how to solve standard deviation without a calculator that can give you the answer right away. So using the formula. So this is kind of the long way of solving standard deviation. Okay. So x bar would be equal to, so the sum of x all over n. So you would add up all, so we're finding the average first. So we add up all of our values. So 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8 all over n, which would be 6. So our final answer would be 5.5. Okay. And then over here we want to find x minus x bar. So an easy way to do that would be probably to set up some sort of a chart. So you do x minus x bar, then you would do x minus x bar all squared. So your values in your chart would be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then over here you would have x each specific value. So in this case it would be 3 minus your average, which is 5.5. And then So that would be equal to negative 2.5. It's not really visible there. Okay, so the next one would be 4 minus 5.5, which would be equal to, so you're just taking each value here and subtracting your mean. Okay, so that would be negative 1.5. So 5 minus 5.5 would be negative 0.5. 6 minus 5.5 would be 0.5. 7 minus 5.5 would be 1.5. And then 8 minus 5.5 would be 2.5. Okay, and then over here what you're going to do is take each value here and square them. So over here you have negative 2.5, and you would actually square that, and you would get 6.25. So negative 1.5, you would square that and get 2.25. Negative 0.5 all squared would give you 0.25, and then 0.5 squared would give you 0.25. And over here you'd have 1.5 squared, which would be 2.25. And then finally over here you would have 2.5 squared, which would be 6.25. And then once you get those, all of those, you could actually figure out the sum of them by just adding them all up. So at the bottom of your chart, you would add up these and you would get 1750, which would be the sum of x minus x bar squared. And the reason we had to set up a chart is because we had to first figure out x bar, our average, which was 5.5. Then once we did that, we have to figure out x minus x bar values, which we did here. Okay, and then once we do that, we have to take those values and figure out what that value squared is. So we squared those values and we got our x minus x bar values all squared. And then we could figure out the sum of all those values by adding everything up. So once you get this, now you can just go ahead and plug it into your standard deviation formula. So you just get 17.5 divided by n minus 1. So how many values do you have? In this question, you have 6 values, so n minus 1 would be equal to 5. Okay, so that would go here, and then you would get root 3.5, and finally you would get 1.87 as your final answer. Okay, so this is using the formula for standard deviation. Like I said, there are some advanced calculators, scientific calculators, that do this for you by just plugging in the values and you just press the button and you can find it. However, if you just have a standard scientific calculator, then you would have to use the formula. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to solve standard deviation using the second formula. There's another formula that I feel is a little bit easier than this one. So let's do an example using that formula. Okay. So formula number 2 was the following. For standard deviation, n times the sum of x squared minus the sum of x all squared, all over n times n minus 1. So this is formula 2 for standard deviation. So first thing you want to do is find the sum of your x values. So the question was asking, so looking at the same question, we were asked to find the standard deviation of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So first thing you're going to do is find the sum of x squared. So you're going to take each value and square them, and then figure out the sum. Okay, so squaring each value and adding those up. So you want to square them first and then add them. That's for this part here. So it's the sum of x squared. So what that means is you have to do x squared first and then sum them up. And then over here you have the sum of x all squared. So in that case, you want to find the sum first and then square your answer after. So you're going to add everything up first. And then square that answer. So we get 33 and we square it, and now we get 1089. So as you can see, this is not the same as this, okay? So these are two different numbers. So once you find those two, you can just go ahead and plug them into the calculator. Now n, for this example, we've got 6 values, and n represents how many values we have. So n equals 6, n minus 1 obviously equals 5. So if we plug these values into our new formula here, we have 6 times the sum of x squared, which would be 199, minus the sum of x all squared, which would be 1089, all over n, which is 6 for this example. We have 6 values, and then n minus 1, which is 5. Okay, and when you actually work this out, you would go ahead and do multiplication first. So you do 6 times 199 minus 1089. Okay, and then divide by 6 times 5, 30. And your final answer, when you're all done, should be the same thing. So you should get 3.5, and it should be 1.87 as your final answer. Okay, so like I said, you would do this part first, multiplication, and the bottom, and then go ahead and subtract those, and then after you subtract those, you would divide by 30, and you should get 3.5, and your final answer would be 1.87. Okay, so that's standard deviation. If you're ever asked to find the variance of data, I'm just going to add something here. If you're asked to find variance, that's another, For variance, you just take your standard deviation and square it, and that would give you the answer for variance of data. Okay, and another thing I quickly want to mention is range for statistics. So as you know, range is the difference between the highest value in a data set and the lowest value in a data set. So if you were asked to find the range of that example that we just did, okay, 3, 4, for the following data set, say you were asked to find a range, then you would just take the highest value, which is 8, subtract the lowest, which is 3, and your final answer would be 5. Okay, so that would be range, and you would have to, like I said, highest value minus lowest, and that's it. So that's how you find the range of your data. Variance is, you could just square your standard deviation, and then standard deviation we also covered. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me at evemathtutoring@outlook.com, or you can post questions on the channel page.